So you've chosen to play the healing class with the most group utility in the game. I think that's a great decision. Wardens are able to provide major toughness for the entire group. Only class that can do this. That increases everybody's max health by 10%. This is huge, and some people would consider it, honestly, necessary for many of the hard modes. At the very least, it's super important. You can also provide major resolve for the entire group, which reduces everyone's damage taken by 9%. And again, only class that can really do that in the game. In addition to that, whenever you heal an ally who is under 40% health, you get major mending, which increases your healing done by 16%. Which is pretty huge, honestly, and you don't have to do anything to proc it. In addition to that, there's also some really nice buffs that other classes can bring, but it's really nice that you have them in your toolkit. And you actually have some really good class heals, which many classes have almost no good class heals. So there's a lot to recommend a Warden, but you clicked on this video, so you probably already know many of those things. And if not, well, you lucked out. Basically, in every optimized group, you want a Warden healer in the group. It's the one class you absolutely want. With any optimized group, you want a Warden healer. So with that, let's go ahead and start talking about these skills. So we will have two kinds of skills on this build guide today. We will have set skills that generally don't leave your bar. Now, there's a reason to move almost every skill from your bar in some weird, odd situation. But by and large, the non-flex skills will just stay on your bar unless somebody else is providing that buff, that skill, or something else like that. The other skills are flex spots. And these flex spots, you can really put anything you need here, okay? That's the whole point. It's there to be flexible. Anything you need to put in for some reason, those are the first skills that I would swap off your bar. Now, starting on our front bar, that's going to be our Resto bar, and we have Healing Springs. Healing Springs is from the Resto staff skill line. It's a really good heal. It also provides you with Magicka recovery per ally healed. So in group content, this can become very useful. I will note this is a heal over time. Sometimes you see new healers spamming this. You do not want to be casting this too often. You want to cast it, let it tick down, and then just keep it up. If you need a burst heal, you're going to use something else. Next up is going to be the first Warden skill that we're going to talk about, and that's Budding Seeds. Budding Seeds is just a really great heal. It's honestly an amazing skill. And while it has a very short duration at only 6 seconds, there's also a burst heal at the end of it. Now, you can recast this early to give that burst heal earlier. In general, I would almost never do that. There are a few situations where you might want to do that, but most of the time, the duration is so short that you could just let it tick down and it'll give you that burst heal at the end. And instead of casting it early, you can actually use our next skill that we'll talk about as kind of your burst heal. Budding Seeds also provides a synergy for your group, and that's also really nice to help with the recovery. Using synergies will restore resources. This is one of our main heals though, so in addition to Healing Springs, you want to try to make sure that you have Budding Seeds down 100% of the time. It's very important to do that. Next up is Combat Prayer. Combat Prayer is what we generally use for our spammable heal. Okay, someone is about to die, Combat Prayer is usually the way to go. This is both because of the heal, but also because of another benefit of this skill, which is Minor Berserk. Minor Berserk increases the damage done by those hit with this ability by 5%. Now, typically, you'll have to cast this twice to make sure it procs on everybody in the group, particularly if you're the only person healing the group. If you're on PC and you want to use an add-on, I really like Buff the Group for tracking this, just because I like the simplicity of the UI, and you can see who has Minor Berserk on them just by selecting it, and you can see who's in the group and who has the buff when. Sometimes you have to hit this again multiple times to make sure you get everyone. But this is our main burst heal. After that, we have Echoing Vigor. Echoing Vigor is a skill that we also need to cast twice to make sure we hit everybody in the group, so that's very important to note. This is a sticky hot, so once you proc this, the heal goes on everybody that it hits, and it stays on them for 16 seconds no matter where they go. So this can be really useful if you have people running in and out of group, certain mobile fights and things like that, where if you drop a ground dot, everybody's kind of moving out of it. It doesn't really work very well, so Echoing Vigor is a really nice skill. The other benefit of this is it actually uses stamina, and so that helps us with our mag recovery, because sometimes our stamina sits pretty much full. We're not really doing anything with it. So Echoing Vigor gives us a use for all that stamina. After all, if you're sitting at full stamina and your stamina recovery is not doing anything for you. And so by using another skill, it really helps us to spread the love on the Magicka. After that, we have our first flex spot, and we're actually going to come back and talk about our flex spots at the end of the video. Moving on to our front bar ultimate, this is also kind of a flex spot, but I'm still going to go ahead and talk about it now because generally it won't really change. So what we have here is Reviving Barrier. Reviving Barrier is really nice in a lot of situations when you know there's a bunch of damage about to go out, so that you can kind of cast it preemptively. It can also be useful if things have gone south and maybe you need to get a res or something something real quick, or people are dying, the other healer's dead, you can pop this, hopefully give you a moment or two of reprieve. You can toss some more heals down for everybody and hopefully recover. The other reason, and really the main reason we keep this on our front bar in particular, is because there are passives from the skill line which will increase our magic recovery by 10% for each skill we have in that skill line. Oh, an important note, this is from the PvP skill line. Sorry if I didn't mention that. So again, there's a passive down there, Magic Aid, increases our recovery for 10% for each support ability slotted, of which this is one. So just having this on our bar will increase our magic recovery by 10%. This is really big, it's pretty huge, and will help, even if we don't use it, just having it on our bar gives us that magic recovery. And most of the time, if things are going well, we don't want to be spamming barrier in an ideal situations. If you're having to do that a lot of times, there's probably some other issue going on that you might want to look into solving. But it's great in a pinch. Now moving on to our back bar. First up here is going to be our wall of elements. So you can actually use both morphs of this skill. I think the blockade it's larger, it lasts a little bit longer, frees us up to do more things that are more important to do. The other morph, unstable wall, will do a little bit more damage if you're trying to do that for some reason. And can be nice because you can spam it for burst damage. So if you're kind of using this Overlander and dungeons and stuff like that, the extra damage, being able to have something you can spam for extra damage can be helpful, especially if you're in really low DPS groups. So there is a reason to use the other skill in many situations. But the main reason we have this on our bar is because one skill from each skill line will make sure that our back bar enchant is procced at all times, even when we're on our front bar. And Wall of Elements is what does it for our Destro Staff skill line. So we will run an infused back bar trait with a Crusher enchant. And the reason for that is because we want to make sure that our group has full penetration on any bosses or major adds that they're fighting. And even though this is an AoE ability and we have that enchant on it, then enchant only applies to one target. So there's a fair number of fights in the game, not a crazy number, but there's enough that oftentimes you want more than one person running a Crusher enchant, and you want it to be infused so it has a higher value so that your group can kind of build towards that. So you'll be expected to have this down 100% of the time. That's why I like the longer duration on the blockade. And if there's multiple targets, sure, your tanks and maybe the other healers are running it, but sometimes you need multiple enchantments to make sure you hit all the important targets. Examples of that would be Halls of Fabrication, the triplets, the first boss in Dreadcell Reef, when you also have the Atronox up, and so on and so forth. Second boss, Dreadcell Reef, there's a whole bunch of situations. And depending on what kind of staff you're running, if you're running an Ice Staff, you're helping apply Minor Breach, and if you're running a Lightning Staff, you're helping with Off Balance. Moving on, we have another Warden skill here, and that's Expansive Frost Cloak. So this is what provides that major resolve for everybody. Now you can use the other morph of this, but it has a smaller radius. It's only 8 meters, which can work in many situations. But and that one will also provide minor protection for you, which reduces your damage taken by 5%. That's nice, but I think having the Expansive Cloak, if you're just going for like a one-size-fits-all thing, is better to make sure that you hit everybody in the group. And again, that just serves to reduce damage taken by 9%, and it's pretty huge, and you're the only class in the game that can really provide that group buff for everybody. So it's really important that you have this skill and that you're running it. You know, if you have a Warden tank or someone else running it, sure, that's fine. You could drop it in that situation, but that's pretty much it. You generally want to be running it. Moving further to the right, our last one here on our bar is Energy Orb. Energy Orb is a good heal over time. It's a smart heal. It'll pick several people to heal as it's kind of traveling forward. It also provides a synergy for the group, which will further help with sustain. So it's a great heal, no reason not to use it. So what we want for our ultimate on our back bar is Aggressive Warhorn. And the reason we want that is because it increases, there are two reasons. One is it increases the max stats of everybody in the group whenever we use it for, you know, a very long duration, like 30-something seconds-ish. And having increased max stats actually equates to more damage for your group and more healing for you. So that's one of the reasons. But the major reason that you want it is for the Major Force, which increases critical damage by 10%. Again, this is not one of those things in optimized groups. Usually you'll build and expect that you have Warhorn, you have this Major Force up most of the time, if not all of the time. And that increases critical damage by 10%, which equates to over 5% effective damage increase. I know it doesn't seem like that much, but when what happens is you stack all these various buffs, and that's why you see on like the trial dummy, the numbers are so much different than what you might see on one of the other dummies, is because the trial dummy is giving you all those buffs, and this is one of the major ones that you want to make sure you have. So Aggressive Warhorn generally on our back bar, and it's important that we put on our back bar. We'll talk more about that when we get to the gear section. Now let's go ahead and move back into our front front bar and talk about those flex spots. So first up here, I have Fetcher Infection. This is a Warden skill. It provides minor vulnerability, which increases the damage taken by a target by 5%. Now, generally, you want this up 100% of the time on any particular boss. If you have a Warden in the group, they will absolutely be running the same skill, so you don't need to run it. So that's why it's a flex spot here. There's a lot of situations where you won't actually need to run this, but you should know about it. It's more important in smaller group content like 4-mans and stuff like that. It also does pretty good DPS, and as a healer, it can be nice to do a little DPS sometimes. Beneath that, we have Healing Ward. This is a resto staff skill, so it has to be on our front bar, and this is a very situational skill, but it's crucial. It's really important whenever you actually need it. So what this does is it provides a shield for the target, and it will tend to pick, it tries to pick the person with the lowest health. Sometimes it doesn't always work like that, or somebody's health drops or something else, and it won't go on the right person. So it can be a little bit problematic, but the idea here is you use this in situations where there's some sort of healing debuff. And this applies for any situation. Usually whenever there's a healing debuff, in group content, what happens is someone's health is chunked down really low. It might be, around 30% typically, and it's usually worse in hard modes. And then you have to heal them to full health. But during that time, usually they have a healing debuff that is equal to the amount of health percentage they lost. So if they lose 70% of their health, it's usually like a 70% healing debuff. That makes it really, really hard to heal someone up to full health in those situations. And what can happen is a lot of the situations you'll be getting damage in. So this happens in the first boss of Sanity's Edge. It happens in Sunspire with the tombs on Locustes. This happens in Cloud Rest. I think those are the three main places that happens. But in Cloud Rest, you'll do something else. We'll talk about that later. But what'll happen again, their health will drop down by let's say 70%, and then they have a 70% healing debuff. And the situation is often that there's other damage going on, or there could be other damage going on. And if that target takes more damage, they still have that healing debuff. So it makes it even harder to heal them out. And it can make it basically impossible to heal them out if there's a lot of damage going on. So what this allows you to do is you put the shield on them so they stop taking any damage. Okay, that's the main thing. Okay, let's stop the bleed. So it stops them from taking any damage. While the shield is up, it does actually heal them for a percentage of the shield's remaining strength. So that's really nice. But the other thing is that then we can heal them up quickly, and we don't have to worry about them taking damage and then having to heal even more with that healing debuff on. Okay, so it stops them from taking more damage, and that's why it's so important. So in Sunspire on the tombs, this is a great skill to have. You wait for the person to walk in, wait for their health to drop, and then you cast the skill so that it chooses the person hopefully with the lowest health, which is hopefully the person who just went in the tomb. This is, helpful on regular veteran, and it's almost required on hard mode. You can do it without it, but it's a huge help to have it. So something you really want to keep in mind, and something you want to get leveled up and morphed. And that's kind of going to be the story with many of these skills that we're going to talk about, these flex spots, is that there's certain situations where you don't need them often, but when you do need them, they're absolutely crucial, and that's why we have so many flex spots on a healer. I'm sorry, it's just the nature of healers in ESO. Kind of makes for a fun play style though, but it is a bit complicated. After that, we have Radiating Regen. This is something you could typically keep on your bar. It can be really helpful for dungeons because no one wants to stack in dungeon runs, especially in pugs. But this is a skill I also see overused sometimes, okay? So you don't want to be using this as your spammable because it's a heal over time. So casting it more often than you need to doesn't do anything. It resets the heal timer, but instead, you should probably be using something else if you need some sort of burst heal, or if people are dying, you don't want to be spamming this, cast it and get it on them, but then you want to be using some other heal to augment, kind of help with that. But this is best whenever a group is really spread out. Whenever you're not in a group, you have to loose stack or whatever, you can use this. Many places that's useful. VAS can be useful in Cloud Rest if you're kite healing in particular. There are plenty of places, but again, I see a lot of healers kind of use this as their spammable, and it's like the only heal they use. That's a really bad habit to get into, and I strongly encourage you not to. If you're in any kind of organized content and your group is spread out, that's a conversation you need to have with your group. We'll talk about that more in a second, but I see far too often healers, just using this and think it's like the one skill to rule them all. It's not that great of a heal, and it's certainly not going to help with a lot of damage going out. I mean, it'll help, but it's not going to solve all your problems. After that, moving to the back bar, first up here is Enchanted Growth. So the reason we have this on our bar is because Enchanted Growth, besides being a good heal, it also provides anybody you hit with minor intellect and minor endurance, both of which increase recovery by, I believe, 15%. In minor intellect is going to be your magicka, minor endurance is stamina. So you can get this buff from several other locations, one of them being a Nightblade, the other one being an Arcanist, at least the two notable ones. So if you have a Nightblade healer or an Arcanist healer, they should be using skills that provide this buff, so you shouldn't have to. But if you don't have one of those classes, then you probably want to be using this skill. This is something where the DPS are like, I don't know why the recovery is bad, it's really hard to sustain. It might be because they don't have those buffs, and so this is one way you can give it to it. The reason we don't use this all the time is because it kind of fulfills the same role. Besides the buffs, it provides the same utility as a combat prayer, and so normally you just want to use combat prayer if you can help it, and you just use this to keep up the buffs. Moving to the right, we have Ring of Preservation. This is kind of an odd skill. It's from the Fighters Guild skill line. It's a stamina heal, but in addition to it just being a decent heal, it also provides minor protection. Minor protection reduces the damage taken by anybody inside of the ring here by 5%. It also provides minor endurance, which we just talked about, but it only provides endurance. It doesn't provide the magic recovery, so less useful for that. This can be really useful in any situations that, the group is going to be taking a lot of damage, particularly damage over time. It can reduce that damage as well as providing the heal. It will cast centered on you, so you do need to be kind of standing in the center of the group, so that reduces its utility, but you do want to know about the skill, and it's something that I think is honestly underutilized in a lot of situations. So our Betty here is used for extra magicka recovery. It does provide us with some buffs that we normally get from using kind of expensive potions. That's kind of an added bonus, but the main reason we'll typically use this is for the extra magicka recovery, particularly helpful in smaller groups. In a large group with our healing springs, we're probably going to be fine on magicka, but in a dungeon, it might not be the case. Then we have Overflowing Altar. Overflowing Altar is a really great skill that you pretty much want down all the time. You want someone running Overflowing Altar at all times. That's the main thing. It doesn't have to be you, could be the other healer. Certainly you have several class skills you absolutely want on your bar, so a lot of times it makes sense for the other healer to run it, but you should still level it. The reason you want this is because it provides a synergy that will heal a target for a lot of damage. And with Overflowing heals for, I think, 60-65% as opposed to 40%, and that extra 20% is really huge, or 25%, I don't remember which it is. And that's really huge if you're a tank, right? And the idea here is that if the tank takes a big hit, maybe they miss a block that they shouldn't have or something, the synergy will pop up and they can hit it instantly and get an instant heal. Now, normally what actually happens is they take a lot of damage. It takes you a second to see that. Takes you a second to then move to the right skill, to cast that right skill, and by that point, the tank may have died. So what this allows is instant recovery for anybody who takes a bunch of damage. They can hit it and get a big burst heal, so that's why you want it down. The minor life steal that it gives it's not nothing, but it's also not really going to save the day in 99.99% of situations. So it's just kind of a nice to have, but it's not really that important. The radius on this is huge, so that's also really nice. You can usually cast it, if you cast this in the middle of Cloud Rest, everybody in the Cloud Rest will be able to, in Zamaj on the main fight, or any of the side fights will be able to use it if you cast it in the center. That's how big the radius is. Moving on from there, we have another PvP skill line ability, and that is going to be Efficient Purge. So Purge is one where you don't always need this skill, but when you do need it, it's absolutely crucial, and you really want Efficient Purge. Otherwise, this costs 8,000. Purge regular costs 8,000 mana or something. It's crazy. So this reduces it nearly in half to go with the Efficient Morph. So it's very important that you unlock this skill and have it leveled. The main place that you'll see this used is going to be Veteran Halls of Fabrication, but there are other situations where you might want to slot a Purge, and it's very important you have it when that situation comes up. After that, we're moving on to our Destro Staff skill line here, and we have Crushing Shock. Crushing Shock is another utility skill. It allows you a range interrupt. A lot of times there'll be situations at various fights where you'll need to interrupt somebody, and it can be helpful to have a support do that. So that's why you want to level this skill and get it morphed to Crushing Shock, as the other morphs will not interrupt. Then next up here, we're moving on to the Undaunted skill line. This is Bone Surge. So Bone Surge is one of these, again, very utility-based skills that is not really important until you need it, and then it's super important. So what this does is you cast it, it'll provide you with a shield, but then it puts up a synergy that someone else in the group can use. And when they use that synergy, it provides a shield for half the group. I think it's procs on 4, maybe 5 other people. Not enough to cover the entire group, so you do want both healers, or at least 2 people, typically running Bone Surge. So this is mainly used in Cloud Rest, in Baneful during Execute. Everybody takes a bunch of damage. someone uses the Bone Surge Morph, that provides the shield for multiple targets. And it also gives them major vitality, which increases their healing received by 16%. So again, the main part of this is the shield, so they don't keep taking damage, so that then you can actually heal them out. And it will selectively choose the people with the lowest health. Similarly, in Cloud Rest, you might need your wings. So this is Deceptive Predator. This will give you minor evasion, which will reduce your damage taken from AoEs, which can be kind of nice. But the main reason we're using it when we're kiting in Cloud Rest or any other situation where we need some speed, it's nice having a class option here with our wings. Whenever you're running and getting sending down spears and stuff like that, having a speed increasing ability is pretty crucial. It's pretty important. Then we have another support skill here with Mystic Guard. So Mystic Guard is typically used whenever you have a tank that's going to be taking a lot of damage. So what this allows you to do, it puts a tether on the target, and you can kind of see it, and it'll get kind of thin as they go further away towards the edge of this tether. It can go up to 15 meters away, and what it does is it transfers 30% of their damage taken to you. And that can be enough to really keep that person alive. And as a healer standing in group in a bunch of heals, hopefully you shouldn't be taking enough damage to actually kill you. Although there are situations where problems can arise. Generally, you use this. If you have a new tank, it can also be a very useful skill. But in certain hard modes, in like Veteran Sunspire, especially if you have like a new tank that's rolling under the dragon to pull the Atros under in hard mode on Yolnagrin, many situations where this can be useful. You do have to put this on both bars. You have to realize that. So you will have to lose a spot on both bars, which can make your bar space a little bit tight, but very important to have this. It also provides minor vitality, increasing the healing received by you and the target, which just further helps keep everybody alive. Really nice utility skill, also really nice for newer tanks and situational content. And then our last flex skill. I know there's so many flex skills here for healers. There's so many situations where you're like, you won't need this hardly ever. But when you do need it, you absolutely need it. And that's going to be elemental susceptibility. So this is also used in Cloud Rest, but it can be other situations. It basically provides major breach, which reduces a target's resistances and increases the damage taken by 9%. It's like 6,000 resistances that it does. This is used in Cloud Rest on the orbs. If you're kiting, you'll dot up all the orbs with this ability, and that will make them easier to kill. Basically, that's what you use it for, okay? It's mostly for the major breach, and there's situations where it can be useful for you to be doing it. And I think that's it for our skills. I know that's a lot of them. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about the sets here. Typically, we have two setups here. One is Spell Power Cure and Pillager's Prophet. Spell Power Cure drops from White Gold Tower. Pillager's Prophet drops from Dreadcell Reef. You do not need the perfected version of this set, and that applies to all sets for everybody. So Spell Power Cure, Pillager's Prophet, and then Symphony of Blades is our monster set. So Spell Power Cure provides a lot of weapon and spell damage. Pillager's Prophet will actually provide a lot of ultimate to our group whenever we cast our ultimate. And then Symphony of Blades provides a bit of recovery for those that we're healing. I will note that there's kind of an advanced setup that you can do with Spell Power Cure, Pillager's Prophet, and Symphony of Blades, and that is to front bar on your Resto Staff bar Spell Power Cure, and then back bar Pillager's Prophet, and then you're always casting your ultimate on your back bar in that situation, and then your front bar will make sure you keep up Spell Power Cure. And then that allows you, since you front bar, back bar those, it allows you a couple of free spots on your body. And since you front bar and back bar those two sets, it leaves you with a couple of flex spots, and you can actually slot a mythic in that situation. Pearls of El Nofe will help you generate a lot more magicka, and that pairs really well with Pillager's Prophet, which gives extra magicka recovery to everybody whenever you're casting your ultimate. I guess not recovery, but it gives a bunch of ultimate to everybody whenever you use yours. So the more ultimate you can generate, the more benefit you can provide to the group. Now, you do have to keep your magicka low with that, and you also need to make sure that you're on your front bar like once every 3 seconds. Even though Spell Power Cure lasts for a little bit more than that, you need to make sure that the tick is actually going off. And if you're losing any of your ticks of Spell Power Cure and you're dropping that major courage, then it's probably not worth doing that. Now, the issue with that is that you do have to have low magicka, and so you might need to worry about your magic recovery if you're newer, if you're running the Pearls of El Nofe, but it's something you could work towards. Just know that that is a setup, and it is a meta setup that you might want to build towards as you get, improve your healing skills. Not something that I would worry too much about early on. I'm sorry, I said I wasn't going to talk about this stuff, and I'm talking about it. Okay, so after that, our next setup is going to be Roaring Opportunist and Jorvold's Guidance, otherwise referred to as Rojo. So Roaring Opportunist drops from Kind's Aegis and Jorvold's Guidance drops from Scalecaller Peak. And the reason we pair these two together is because Jorvold's Guidance increases the duration of our buffs that we give. And so we pair that with Roaring Opportunist. Roaring Opportunist, you have to heavy attack. And there's an add-on for this. Most healer add-ons, by the way, are just known by the name of the set. So it's called Roaring Opportunist is the add-on. And that will help you keep track of your buff up times. And you hold down heavy attack, it procs, and then you'll have to do it again because just like many of other skills like Vigor and many of these other skills, it only applies to part of the group, and so you have to cast it twice. Combat Prayer, you have to cast it twice to make sure that you hit everybody in the group. So you hold down heavy attack, goes off, and then you see the timer go off. You'll see one of them, and that's ticking down. That's the buff timer, and then the other one is the cooldown timer. And then obviously you have two heavy attacks, so that's why you have two instances of all of these timers. It's a little bit confusing at first. I've done videos covering how all that stuff works, so please go check those out if you're at all unclear. But usually you'll drop a bunch of heals, and then as soon as you go to pull, you're heavy attacking twice right off the bat because you already have heals down and nobody should be taking that much damage anyways. Proc it, and then you keep track of those cooldown timers. When it's almost up, you go ahead and queue up a heavy attack, which takes 1.8 seconds if you're curious about how long a heavy attack takes to go off. So you can 1 second early go ahead and queue up a heavy attack, do that twice, and then go back to the rest of your rotation. So you will need to make sure you're keeping up all your hots during that time to make sure that you keep the make sure that no one dies while you're trying to heavy attack. You should also make sure that people are not dying because you're heavy attacking. If that's the situation, don't heavy attack. Sometimes when you have newer groups, people will try to commit suicide, stand in AoEs, and you might need to like pocket heal them. Yes, tell them, hey, don't stand there. Talk to them probably after the pull, but it just depends. Kind of address the issue, but in the moment, you just want to make sure that you're healing them because, buffs don't help if somebody's dead. You're going to lose a lot more damage that way than if making sure you have 100% buff up times. Although there are times when you want to let someone die so that they get the feedback after you've told them already not to stand where they're standing. It can be good feedback for someone to be like, oh, I keep dying. So, and otherwise they might think everything's fine. And then they go into another group with a different healer that's not as good as you, and they don't know why they're dying. So then they might blame that healer when it's actually their fault, right? And we don't want that. And then we pair that with Spalder of Ruin. And the reason we do that is because Spalder of Ruin reduces our recoveries, but it buffs everybody else's, and it reduces also our spell power and weapon damage, but it buffs everybody else's spell power and weapon damage. So it helps the group do more DPS. And since we're heavy attacking so much, it is a problem with having, low resources, and less recovery. But since we're heavy attacking so much, usually it's fine. And you do want to make sure that you crouch to turn this on, and then you can crouch again to turn it off. So every time you die, you'll have to crouch again to make sure you turn it on, and you'll see the little red AoE around you. And then we can pair that with the Master's Resto Staff by single barring one of our skills. So we want to make sure if we do that we're only heavy attacking on our Destro Staff bar. So keep that in mind because you want Roaring Opportunist and Jorvold's Guidance to go off at the same time. Typically what I would do in that situation is make sure that I have Jorvold's Guidance active all the time so it works with all of my skills, and then Roaring Opportunist I would back bar in an ideal situation. Now moving on to our blue CP. So here we have Soothing Tide, Swift Renewal. I will generally always keep that on. So Enlivening Overflow here, it increases the health, magic, and stamina recovery of those you overheal, meaning they're at full health and you're overhealing them, by up to 150 for a short period of time. So it just helps with recovery for everybody. Again, sometimes you'll hear DPS complain like, hey, the sustain is bad. Sometimes it's because no one is running Enlivening Overflow. And so it's a great idea to make sure you're running that. Now, you only need one healer running that, so the other option here would be Hope Infusion. When you heal yourself or an ally who's under 50%, it grants them minor heroism for 1 second for every 300 magic or recovery you have. This effect can occur once every 10 seconds. So because this is based on your magic recovery, typically it's better to have that on the SPC healer, and then, have the other healer, your Rojo healer, in something like Enlivening Overflow. And then for our last one here, same situation where you'll have one of the healers running one thing, one of the healers running the other, but we have kind of a few extra here. So from the brink, whenever you heal yourself or an ally under 25%, you grant them a damage shield that absorbs 2,200 damage per second for 6 seconds. this effect can occur once every 30 seconds. So this is, again, the situation where, like, if you have someone being chunked down because you're healing tombs or in Baneful or some other reason where people are low health, it kind of prevents them from dying. It's kind of an oh shit shield that you can provide for the group, but only one healer needs to be running this. The second option here is Salve of Renewal. Whenever you remove a harmful effect from yourself or an ally, you sanctify the ground beneath them and heal them and allies within 8 meters for 1280 health per stage. This effect can occur once every 10 seconds. So kind of the same thing here where it's kind of like an oh shit button. And then for red CP, the only one that I really recommend, you can use a lot of different red CP. There's a lot of useful ones, but Rejuvenation, just to help your recovery, is the main one that I recommend. After that, it's choose your own adventure, okay? If you're just looking for what I like, usually Fortified increases your armor, reduces your damage taken. Celerity gives you 10% increased speed while in combat, which is always really nice. Expert Evasion gives you that free roll dodge, and then Rejuvenation, as we've already mentioned here. And then moving on, we are a Magicka build as a healer typically, so or almost always. So we're going to put 64 points into Magicka, and then we'll use the Ritual, which will increase our healing done. You could also use the Thief Mundus, and there's a few other Mundus you could use situationally, but I think generally Ritual is the way to go for max healing. I also mentioned some optional sets down here that you might be asked to have from time to time. I would say of those, I think honestly that, you know, the two setups that I mentioned earlier are probably the primary setups. The only other one is Ozazan, if I'm saying that correctly, is another set that, you know, can increase the resistances by people in your party by a little over 4,000. That's a huge damage mitigation help. So that is one that if you need survivability, you don't want to run something like Spalder of Ruin. A lot of times you won't run Spalder if you're just trying to survive and what have you. So that could be one you could put down. And then the rest of these are just kind of mentioning things that, like, hey, you might be asked, or it might be useful to have some of these things under certain situations. Well, that was a whole lot. There's so much more I could say about healing and exactly how to do it in different situations and what have you. I've done a fair number of kind of beginner healing videos. They're very long. I go through a lot of stuff, but you can find them here on the channel. If you have any questions, though, I would feel free, please drop them in the comments below, and I will do my best to answer them. I would also strongly encourage you to come by the That Wasn't the Boss Discord. There are help channels there, and it doesn't matter if you're on console or you know, EU or wherever. We're still more than happy to field questions and help you out. And if you're a beginner, we'll help you there. If you're more advanced, looking for sweatier strats and stuff like that, we also have people that can help you with that. So anyways, you're welcome to come by. I strongly encourage you to. That's the best place to get the best information. And it's hard to have a conversation sometimes on YouTube. I see the first comments almost always, but future comments, I don't get any pings or any alerts on, so they can get lost and get missed sometimes. So, you know, so the Discord is always the best place to have kind of a longer form conversation, and people can recommend other resources and stuff like that. But anyways, that's it for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. Remember, if you like this video and you want to see more healer guides, please let me know by hitting the like, subscribing, doing all that kind of stuff. That, you know, when videos do well, when people watch them and they find them helpful, I make more of that kind of video. So that's the best way. Share it with your friends. That's also really a great way to help and let me know that, hey, more people are watching this video. It must be helpful. I should make more of these. But anyways, that's it for today. Appreciate you guys so much for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.